This is Case Kenny, and this is AwareNow.
Case Kenny is the writer, podcaster, and recording artist behind the New Mindset Journal. Case refers to himself as a dudebroguy because, as he says, he isn't any more enlightened than the average person. But what he does have is a hunger and drive to become the best person he can. In his new book, That's Bold of You, he shares how to thrive as your most vibrant, weird, and real self. Thank you so much, Case Kenny, for joining us here on AwareNow so we can hear your story. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today, let's begin with the story behind the story of your podcast, New Mindset Who Dis. Please share your journey before your podcast and what inspired you to start it.
Yes, I started the podcast in 2018. So I've been at it for a while, coming up on 5-6 years. I'm 35 now. So when I started, I was, call it 29. And basically, I just started in reaction to my life. You can call it a quarter life crisis if you want. I don't think crisis is the right word, but basically at that point in my life, I was running a sales team in Chicago, advertising technology. I was traveling a lot. I just gotten out of a relationship. And it was kind of just one of those things where I was like, man, I don't feel like I'm being honest with myself. I don't feel like I'm being honest about what I'm doing, who I'm dating, how I feel, all these kind of like inner life things. And I was kind of frustrated by that fact because I'm a pretty type A person. I worked in sales for a long time. I was always like, oh, this is what we're going to do. Here's the plan. We're going to do it. But for some reason, when it came to my inner life, how I felt, what I wanted, how I looked at life, it just felt very ambiguous. Felt like I was copying and pasting a lot rather than creating my own timeline and doing my own thing. So I just started the podcast in response to that. At the time, podcasting was a little younger as a medium than it was today. And I saw it just as a vulnerable means to challenge myself, to talk through these things, share what I've learned, and use that as a means to live the things that I've learned. Say, here's what I've learned, and I'm going to hold myself to doing it. So that's what I did. And the rest is history, I suppose. But I realized through that process of basically sharing my feelings, what I was actually doing, which was I was actually practicing mindfulness in my own way, in my own kind of form of mindfulness. That was what I was doing. And I also realized that, mindfulness is a muscle. And I've done 530 episodes, and you can't help but get better at being honest with yourself than through the practice of mindfulness and doing it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And here we are today. And, in the process of social media and writing books and quitting my job and all that kind of stuff. But really the mission has remained the same, which is share my feelings for myself, for other people. And it's been very, very, very rewarding.
So, well, sharing is caring. So thank you for caring enough to share as you have and as you do. So, speaking to the fact that mindfulness is the central theme in your work, what are just a couple off the cuff, practical mindfulness techniques or practices that you personally find beneficial?
I would say 2 right off the bat. The most practical form of mindfulness. For one, is journaling. I think journaling is such a great entry point into a mindfulness practice. Because a lot of times we talk ourselves out of mindfulness. Like, what is mindfulness? I have to meditate. I've got to get a therapist. I've got to go on a silent retreat. All very valid forms of mindfulness, of course. But I find that our aversion and our misunderstanding of mindfulness is what leads us to think it's this convoluted, overly spiritual thing. Whereas journaling, it's literally self Q&A. Get a journal, whether it was one of mine or someone else's. Sit down, face yourself with one question, and force yourself to be honest about it. No judgment, all humility, no ego. Sit down and just answer the question. Great entry point. Another one is music. Music's a big part of what I do. I work with a lot of artists and producers to infuse mindfulness into their music and bring their music to my mindfulness audience and the whole thing. But the reason I do that is, what greater medium out there is there other than music to make you feel a certain way? That's literally the purpose of music. Music makes you feel happy, nostalgic, healed, energetic, peaceful, whatever it may be. Infuse music into a mindfulness practice, whether that's just sitting down and be like, all right, I just want to be honest with myself for a bit, put on the right music, or whether it's you want to amp yourself up to finally do something, use music. I think it's such a vulnerable, emotionally catalyzing medium that we'd be remiss to not use it. So I'd say those two as very simple answers.
Journaling, music, and I love how you reference that too. It's just like Q&A with yourself,
Yeah, very simple. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, let's talk for a moment about relationships, because you've talked a bit about that. You've talked about the power of letting go of expectations and attachments in relationships. In letting go of those, what is it that we should be holding on to when it comes to relationships?
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of letting go has a lot of different layers to it, right? Are we letting go of the person, the memories? Like, what exactly are we letting go of? I think the idea of letting go is letting go of attachment. We should never let go of the good memories we have from someone. I really don't think there's ever something called that's failed love. There's always something redeeming from it. I think the sign of a mature person is their ability to say, I'm no longer with this person. Yeah, maybe it ended in a dumpster fire, but there were good memories. And I'm going to appreciate those good memories as chapters in my life. I'm not going to throw them away because it didn't end in a fairy tale ending. I'm going to appreciate them. The challenge, of course, is we as humans are wired to have an attachment to potential, what could have been. And we'll go round and round in our heads of detailing out what we're missing out on the chapter that didn't happen. And I don't think that's very serving. Certainly I think there's purpose in sitting down and understanding what went wrong, why the next level wasn't reached. But to have an attachment to what could have been, I think only holds you back from being in reality, from starting another chapter. So that's what I think we should let go of. Hold on to the lessons, of course. Hold on to what you learned. That's the most valuable part of failed love. As a compassionate human being, though, you should hold on to good memories. The sign of a mature person, again, it's the ability to say, those were good times. I don't have to go back to them to appreciate them. I don't have to belabor the fact that it didn't lead to something else to appreciate what I had. So I think somewhere in the mix there is the idea of holding on versus letting go. And I think it really just sets you up to be in the present, to appreciate what you had, to learn from it, but then to set yourself free to go find a more permanent, more rewarding, more compassionate version of that.
Yeah, no, such great advice. Yeah, so finding the wins within the loss, like that they're always there. There's always something to gain. So
yeah.
So let's talk now for a minute about a different kind of relationship, the relationship between social media and personal development. In your opinion, can technology be a tool, a good tool for personal growth, or do you feel that it often hinders it?
I was just talking about this. I'm never going to be that person who's like, social media has ruined this, that, or the other. I think social media is a gift. We're never been more connected in our lives. And I think that's always beneficial. It's always beneficial to understand the similarities in the human experience, to be inspired by people doing great things, to be able to DM someone you've never met who's halfway across the globe and connect with that person. Yes, that's freaking amazing, of course. There is a tremendous downside, of course, and that is just nonstop comparison. And I think comparison is the ultimate gateway drug into loneliness. I'll even leave it there. I think comparison is the ultimate. It could be like the ultimate decline of humanity if we don't learn to get our comparison in check, because social media is unlimited comparison. I saw a stat the other day that 10% of our daily thoughts are dedicated to comparing ourselves. And I think we have like 10,000 thoughts a day or something like that. So 1,000 individual thoughts a day are dedicated to me comparing myself. And it's likely because of social media. So I think really what we have to get our heads around is, how do we use these pieces of technology in a compassionate way? And that's a boring subject, but I think it's so important to be able to say, I can use social media and compare myself from a place of inspiration, not a place of lack. And that is where the magic lives. If we can delineate that, as opposed to default mode always being, they have this, I don't. I need that. They're better than me. They're on the right timeline. I'm falling behind, whatever it may be. If we can figure out a way to have more self-control and compare from a place of inspiration rather than lack, I think we're in a great space. If we can't, then we're in trouble. And I don't have the answer. And the answer would be don't. The answer would be don't do that. But I'm sure there's a more educated way to say that. But yeah, I think it's good and bad, of course. Same with dating apps. I mean, dating apps are great. If you want a partner, you got to go fish where the fish are. Go fishing where the fish are. Of course, it's fantastic. But then we get into trouble with, oh, there's always another partner, or I don't need to take this seriously because I could just swipe again. So there's downsides to everything that's good in life. Anything in excess is going to be harmful. So I think we just need a measure of discipline and a measure of awareness of how something can detract from our lives. And I think we'll be more suited to use it in a compassionate way.
Totally, completely agree. So in addition to hearing your words on your podcast, they can be read in your books and responded to in your journals. Regarding your journaling, when did you first pick up a pen and begin to journal?
So 2019. And really it was an interesting thing because, again, I'm a pretty practical guy. I don't consider myself overly spiritual. I consider my, getting into the self-development space, to the story earlier, to come from a pretty practical place. And I remember in 2018, 2019, just seeing a lot of people talk about, I get up, Tim Ferriss, get up in the morning, I have a 5 a.m. routine and I journal, and then I go about my day. And I was like, wow, man, these guys seem pretty happy and pretty successful. Maybe I should start journaling. If I remember very distinctly, somewhere in 2018, 2019, going out and buying a bunch of journals. I bought like a dozen of them. I just went nuts. And I remember being like, oh, I'm going to be a journal guy. Like, this sounds great to me, to be able to write and, feel better about myself. And I just remember trying those journals and not really getting it, because I found at that point that the journals fit one of two molds. They were either too prompted to the point where it was, do this in the morning, come back at noon, hold yourself accountable, goals, productivity, this, that, and the other. I was like, I am more stressed out journaling than I am not journaling. Or they were blank sheet of paper. How are you feeling? Share what's on your heart today. And I'm a little too ADD for that. So I was just like, oh, shiny. And I just couldn't really do it. So at my first foray, I was like, oh man, maybe journaling's not for me. But as a type A entrepreneur type person, I was like, well, I want to journal so bad. Maybe I should create a journal for myself. So that's how I got into creating journals, but it's also how I got into journaling myself. I just decided to create what I thought was a good mix of prompted and unprompted. Focus on questions that just force you to check in, but that are specific. And then one big, meaty, tough question that you can take 10 minutes on. And that's that. So the whole process takes, 15 minutes. And from there, I've never looked back. I've never looked back in the sense of creating these journals. I've created a bunch for myself and different emotions, whether it's clarity or healing or closure or anxiety or manifestation. I'm about to come up with another one soon. But I'm the ultimate consumer of my own products. So I really create these journals for myself. The questions that I need to answer, likely the ones that I've been avoiding. And yeah, never looked back.
That's really, really awesome. So let's hear the story. I'm very interested to know the story of your red pen, the notes that you leave with it around Chicago. Yeah. They seem to be self-love notes to the world. How did this handwritten note writing and sharing start? Where did it begin?
So, it started during COVID. For one, I was just, hanging out in my apartment in Chicago. I live in Miami now, but I'll be back in Chicago. But I'm in Chicago for, over a decade. I had all this time. I was doing the podcast. So again, this came from a very practical place. I was like, I want more people to listen to the podcast. I should find a way to kind of summarize my thoughts and get people to be like, oh, that's a good thought. Maybe I'll listen to this podcast. And I was like, well, I could do what a lot of people do. I could fire up Photoshop, create a little 1x1, put a little digital quote on it and call it a day. But I was sitting in at my standing desk in Chicago, and I had a coffee cup that was blank, and I was looking out over the Chicago River. I live downtown, and I was like, why don't I combine the two greatest assets I have, which is living in an amazing, beautiful city, and at that time having a coffee cup. I was like, why don't I write on relatable materials, things that people can touch and feel and smell, take it offline. I just had this theory that, maybe, the fact that, you put a quote in a context that people can relate to, you put it on something that people can touch and feel, that people resonate with it. So that's how it started, and those blew up. And never really looked back from there. Put them up all around Chicago and Miami. I've now gotten more into a cleaner medium of just writing on a sheet of paper, and those do really, really well on social media. But really, the incentive has been the same from a purpose perspective, which is that I can do these podcasts where I talk for 20 minutes on end and I don't shut up. But mastery of a subject is reflected in being able to simply explain it. So like, I need to be able to write something in 12 words that I could take 20 minutes explaining. That will show me that I know what I'm talking about. And also it'll be a good reminder for me. And also it'll be a good reminder for other people. So really, it's been an exercise in like creative simplicity, how I can simplify really complex thoughts. And then also it's social media, right? I want people to relate. I want people to share them. I want people to feel good about themselves through them. So it's been kind of a balance of all those things. But my handwriting's gotten a lot better over the years. I save all the quotes. They're all real and they're not digital. I don't write on an iPad or anything. They're up pieces of paper. I've got a stack of sketchbooks over there looking at it. I do some events and speaking events where I'll go and I'll put up all the quotes on a wall and kind of showcase them. So it's big. And it's kind of back to the journaling thing. I think there's a lot of power in the mind-body connection. And for me to sit down and write something physically, it just makes it more real to me. And I really enjoy it as a creative outlet.
That's awesome. And yeah, because we spend so much time, existing in a world made of pixels, that when we're able to touch something, feel something, and be part of something that's real, that's awesome. So
yes, well said. Yes.
So I love that your newest book, that's Bold of You, is referenced this way: How to Thrive as Your Most Vibrant, Weird, and Real Self. So at this point in time, I would like to get very personal. Case, what do you think is the weirdest thing about yourself?
The weirdest thing about myself. Oh, who knows? I mean, I do all kinds of weird things, from, foods that I eat like a toddler. I'm 35-year-old man, but, dino nugs and mashed potatoes. Who knows? I mean, so many weird, everyone's got little quirks and little preferences. When I think about being weird, I just think about being real. And, people gravitate towards that word because people like to, be weird this, weird that. But, I think for me to get to where I am today, I had to get to a point where I embraced being weird, being cringe. Like these words that I think previously are labels that are detrimental to who we are. And I wanted to take back the power of them. I think if you talk to 20-year-old Case, I would never want to seem weird to someone. Never, ever. And now I love being weird because that means that I'm being true. Not like in a quirky way and trying to be weird or whatever, but just being true to myself. And so I really just wanted to bring that word back. It had been a label that so many of us had lived in fear of, that I wanted to bring it back to us. And that really was the goal of that word. And I think we all have weird things about us, whether it's like overtly weird or whether it's just weird in the sense that it makes us stand out or it makes us a little bit different. But I think it's such a powerful word because it reflects truth. And that's really what I wanted to do.
Wow. Well done with that. So let's get back to this. The book specifically, that's Bold of You, is about letting go of who you're not, from what I've read. And the thing of it is that most people spend their entire lives trying to figure out who they are, not who they're not. So my question for you now is, why do you feel that's really important to define who you're not?
Yeah, because it's such a great point. And I think for two reasons. The first is like, you think about life, it's like life, you grow up and you're just a sponge, right? You're just absorbing, right? You're absorbing what your parents tell you, what college tells you, what friends tell you, what your social media tells you. You're just absorbing these things and you're picking and choosing, hopefully. But for the most part, your early teens, your early 20s, all your 20s probably, it's just a measure of copying and pasting. You're taking what other people tell you, you're absorbing a lot, you're trying a lot, you're doing all these things. So really, that is a time of becoming. You're becoming more, but likely it's through the process of mimicking and being inspired, which is good. just what I've realized in my 30s is that the real process of becoming yourself is about letting go of a lot of those things, hanging on to what really matters to you, and then rocking and rolling with that moving forward. Like, you need the experience of trying and failing, copying and pasting. You need that. But the real magic of life comes then when you unbecome and you unlearn. I truly do believe that. And from the perspective of what you're saying, it's kind of a little bit of a word play, right? You're unbecoming to become, you're unlearning to learn, you're doing all these things. And I just think that's, for one, a great journal exercise. One of my favorite journal prompts that I like to do is the question of, what don't you want to regret? You answer that in order to figure out what you want to do. You kind of reverse into it, because it's easy to say, oh, I want to do that because that's that person and that's that person. The idea of regret, frankly, is only relative to you. It's one of the most personal questions. I'm not going to borrow regrets, really. I'm going to say, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm scared to death of regretting this thing. Let's use that to back into what I want in life. And it's kind of the same idea with the book. It's like, what can we let go of? There's chapters on the idea of mimetic desire, which is the idea of, we were just mimicking our way through life. How can we take that and inspire ourselves to say, okay, here's my perspectives, here's my wants, here's my desires. Which of these is actually true to me? And we're going to let go of the rest. And it's really, for me, I've just realized that as humans, we're so hardwired to think that the key to life and happiness is more and better. And I certainly think that's true in a lot of sense, but I've just realized that oftentimes it's different and simpler. And the magic is probably somewhere in between. But the only way to figure out what different and simpler looks like is to take a step back and unlearn some of those more and better efforts that we've just been pounding into our heads without really thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. And I love just that reference of unlearning things, because there's so much that we learn that does not serve us well. So when we can figure out and delineate what to unlearn, so many people look at you, Chase, as a source of inspiration. So question for you now, who are some of the individuals that inspire and motivate you in your own personal development?
So I'll give an answer. I hope it doesn't come across as a non-answer, but I've always struggled with, like, it's ironic. I've always struggled with, like, looking up to, like, other self-help people. Like, I like James Clear, for instance. I like Atomic Habits. I like Ryan Holiday, for instance. I enjoy some of Jay Shetty's stuff. I know Lewis. Like, I know a lot of the people in the scene. I very much respect them. Look up to them, in a sense, of course. But it's back to the issue earlier. If I am just regurgitating what other smart, driven, creative, self-aware people are saying, then we're backed into a corner again. I'm going to have to, a lot of it is great, but some of it isn't great for me. I'm going to have to unlearn a lot of that. So, for me, like, I don't read a lot of self-help books. I really don't listen to a lot of podcasts. For one, because I like to create more than I consume. Which as an author is a slippery slope, because, as an author, you need to be really well read. So I try to consume as much as possible, but I actually read a lot on Reddit, the website. Mm-hmm. And the reason I do that is because it's just normal people. It's everyday people. There's no incentive on Reddit other than, comments and some people enjoying what you have to say, but it's normal people going through heartbreak and sharing what they've learned, failing in their career and sharing what they've learned. All these things that I think are so universal, and they're just sharing just to share. And I've gotten so much life-changing value from Reddit, in addition to James and Ryan and Lewis and Jay and these guys and Mel and all the Rachel Hollis and all these people who I know personally as well. I just very much gravitate towards the middle. Average people sharing average things. I've had one of my favorite quotes comes from an anonymous person on Reddit. Just some random person said this and then signed off and was never heard from again. They wrote, "The difference between a head full of memories and a head full of regret is your ability to forgive yourself." That's been my guiding light. I read that on Reddit. Some random person on Reddit wrote that. I was like, anyway, so I hope that's a good answer. I just really gravitate towards normal, everyday people. I get a lot of value. I'm very inspired by some of the great authors and podcasters and, influencers in the space. But for me, it's just, I like the grounding of normalcy. To me, that's very inspiring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that was very much an answer, not a non-answer,
Okay.
for sure.
All right.
So one more question for you today, Case, is this. With your work, you have a way, and even when we're speaking now, of making self-understanding, self-worth, self-love seem so easy. For those who are having a hard time finding self-love in a self-critical world, what advice would you share with them right here and right now?
Well, I'd say to the topic of the theme that we're developing, just in talking for a couple minutes here, is you can't sit down and just love yourself to infinity. Like you can't force self-love, right? I wish you could. I wish you could say, okay, I'm just gonna love myself. Noise, distraction, other people gets in the way of that. So perhaps the better way to approach the subject is, how can I remove the self-hate, the self-criticism, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, unbecome those things? And I think the only option then is going to be, all right, well, maybe I've got more going for me. Maybe I could trust myself. Maybe I could forgive myself. That would be my answer. And I think, self-love comes when you learn to forgive yourself, certainly. So I think self-forgiveness is always going to play a role in anyone's journey, whether it's a healing journey, whether it's a journey to discover yourself, or whatever label we're putting on it. Learning to love yourself, I think, will naturally come from forgiving yourself. And forgiveness is one of those topics that, is a little ambiguous. What does it mean to forgive yourself? I think forgiving yourself means trusting yourself. I think a lack of forgiveness comes when we don't trust ourselves, namely when we look back and we say, man, I messed that up so bad. And maybe you did. Maybe you messed something up. Maybe you did make the wrong decision in your past. Maybe you did very much disappoint yourself or someone else in the past. Forgiving yourself can take a long time. Coming to terms with things in the past can take a long time. Deciding to trust yourself despite a past mistake, despite past pain, that's doable. You can say, okay, it might take me a while to really make sense of that thing. I need some more perspective. I need some experience before I could really understand that. But I could decide right now in this moment that I can trust myself again, that I'm willing to try again. And I think that kind of incentive can really get the ball rolling, then to start what we just talked about, unbecoming some of these things, unlearning some of these things, fighting back against these things. I think eventually it will lead to a space where self-love comes naturally, because you can't force it. You could read all my quotes, you could read other people's quotes, and it could be little sparks here and there, but you need to find a way to internalize it consistently. And I think that really does come from letting go and forgiveness.
Thank you so much, Case. Thank you for sharing your story, for sharing this time, this space with us. Thank you for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much. How you said learning to love yourself, it was really hard for me to not, to your music point, learning to love yourself. Like, I just wanted to, like, that just started boiling up. I'm like, no, don't
You could
do
put
it
in post.
Don't do it.